Welcome, my children of rot. Are you strung up by the wrists? Are you torn at the seams? Would you do anything to know what tomorrow holds? You would. Well, I knew that already. The tarot never lies, as the cards feel no need to comfort your troubled mind. The cards predict only the truth, the supernatural truth. 78 cards of major and minor arcanas work together to tell a story to be interpreted by the reader. With their aid, I shall determine what fate has in store for you. The cups, the wands, the swords and pentacles, all whispering intimate knowledge of your being. To hear them speak your darkest secrets, one must only know how to listen. Perhaps the deck has been stacked against you in life. Have you been dealt a bad hand? Lay your cards on the table, my dear, and perhaps I could help. These are not cards meant for play, but it is a gamble nevertheless, and the stakes are high. So what are you willing to bet? Shall you be an emperor or a fool? Will you be another flesh-bound volume of my Tales of Midnight? I've read many a man's fortune, but some, as they say, weren't playing with a full deck. Tonight I will share with you their stories, and then you may determine whether or not you wish to know your own. And how it ends. The time has come for me to call your bluff. Decide now whether or not you'd like to fold. Darken the room, my children of rot, and we shall commence. Each card in the deck holds its own power, representing the most intrinsic facets of man's existence, both the positive and the negative. The meanings vary, as inverted cards have the opposite effect as they do upright. Where they land as the cards are spread is also essential to their understanding. This determines whether they be past, present, or future. One card rarely sums up all three for one man, but for Leroy Carter, that card was the Tower. The Tower means disruption and conflict. No peace will be permitted where it stands. It does not simply symbolize change, but a change for the worse. Jarring, traumatic, and unforeseen. On February 7th, 1981, as Leroy Carter Jr. left my parlor, he wanted only to find a warm place to sleep. Mr. Carter was a homeless Vietnam veteran who called San Francisco home. With nowhere else to turn, Leroy decided to take his knapsack into Golden Gate Park. He lay there beside Alvord Lake, never to awaken. Leroy's body was discovered the following morning, still in his sleeping bag, only without his head. 2 corn cobs and a chicken's wing had been jammed into the stump of his throat. 50 feet away from Leroy's body, police discovered several mutilated chickens. With clear evidence of the occult, the case was handed to Sandy Gallant. Gallant was involved with investigating the San Francisco connection to the Jonestown massacre. Her study of the People's Temple and similar cases made her the department's leading authority on cults and ritual murders. She believed the murders were a religious rite performed by a Babalarisha, the word for a priest in Santeria. Santeria being an Afro-Cuban religion with its roots in Nigeria. They worship Orishas, spirits of great power that hold dominion over the forces of nature. To be certain her hunch was correct, Gallant contacted an expert named Charles Wetley. Wetley warned that if Leroy's murder was indeed a Santeria sacrifice, that after 42 days the killer would come back to the scene of the crime to return Leroy's head. On March 22nd, the end of those 42 days, Gallant and her partner went back to the Golden Gate Park and waited for the murderer. Though they remained ever vigilant, the killer was never apprehended. However, the head of Leroy Carter Jr. was found in the tall grass only feet away from where his body was discovered. How did the killer go unnoticed while dropping off the decaying skull of the man they murdered? Perhaps with the ritual complete, the killer will remain unseen. The desperate have come flocking from around the globe seeking my knowledge. One man came all the way from Indonesia. The card he drew from my deck to represent his future was the Hanged Man. This card means a choice you cannot turn back from, unavoidable permanent consequence to a decision that should be made carefully. On April 30th, 1997, in North Sumatra, 42 bodies were discovered in a sugarcane field, all of them buried so that their vacant eyes were forever fixed on a sorcerer's house on the hill. As flesh turned to bone, their spirits would give him power. That same man who came to my parlor all those years ago, Ahmad Suraji. Ahmad Suraji was a powerful Dukan, a shaman who has mastered black magic. Suraji claims that in 1986 the ghost of his father came to him in a vision from hell. The spirit cried out to Suraji that to become the most powerful Dukan, he must drink the saliva of 70 dead young women. And to hasten this process along, Suraji began to kill. That choice which I had mentioned? Aided by his 4 wives, who were also sisters, Suraji would lure unsuspecting women back to his secluded property. Most of the women who were murdered were in desperate situations and were eager for either Suraji's money or his spiritual intervention. Once the women were comfortable, Suraji would strangle them while they gasped for air and fought to loosen the electrical cord strapped around their throats. Suraji would sip the drool from their gaping mouths. Sri Kamala Dewey was his final victim. A young rickshaw puller informed police that he had dropped off the missing woman to Suraji's home, leading to Suraji's arrest. Journalists covering the case were determined to prove Suraji had no mystic powers. Let's not forget, however, Ahmad Suraji still needed 28 more victims to bring his power to full potential. Suraji was executed by firing squad in 2008, a single bullet piercing his blackened heart. His home village of Medan refused his body to be buried there amongst the graves of his victims. The villagers surrounded the police car carrying Suraji's body and would not let them pass. As for Suraji's victims, most bodies could not be properly identified, leaving the families of the suspected victims with little consolation. While visiting England, I read many a man's cards, but one stood out amongst the rest. A man with no soul to sell. A man whose darkness knew no boundaries. The card he selected was the devil. This card means simply entrapment, a warning of a situation from which there is no escape. The following evening, the 21st of September 2001, a grisly discovery was made floating down the River Thames of England. In the murky water bobbed a young boy's torso. The head, legs, and arms were all missing. Had the tide passed in and out only twice more, it is likely the crime would have never been discovered. Authorities were quick to begin analysis on the remains to find any leads there may be, if any. It was found that the limbs of the torso were removed with precision, and it was likely the weapon was sharpened neatly after each incision. In the stomach of the abdomen was a curious concoction. There were plant extracts native to Nigeria, flecks of pure gold, and calabar beans. This caught the interest of Dr. Richard Hoskins, an expert on African religions at Bath University. Hoskins insisted that all of the evidence pointed to only one motive: human sacrifice. The poisonous calabar bean is used by African witch doctors in a potion to paralyze, not to sedate their victims. This means it is very likely that the child was conscious and unable to flee as his extremities were removed. The body had also been drained entirely of blood, a common practice in human sacrifice to please whatever corrupted gods the ritual was meant for. The removed limbs are likely to have been used as talismans and amulets, and the head to keep unwanted spirits at bay. One lead led to the arrest of an immigrant named Kingsley Ojo. Ojo was a human trafficker responsible for smuggling in hundreds of African adults and children to be sold as domestic slaves and prostitutes. Bone analysis of the torso found that the child was likely from Benin City, Nigeria, which was also the hometown of Kingsley Ojo. In Ojo's apartment, VHS tapes of human sacrifices were found, along with burlap sacks filled with painted animal bones. A woman named Joyce Asiajid claims to have left a child named Patrick Erharber in Ojo's care. She feels Patrick is the true identity of the torso British authorities had named Atom. Asiageed's claims have never been substantiated. Though evidence may heavily suggest Kingsley Ojo as the murderer, he was only sentenced to 4 years in prison for human trafficking and deported back to Nigeria. His whereabouts today are unknown. By most. However, let us not forget his card predicted doom, and what I predict there is no escape from. The true identity of the River Thames torso, unfortunately, remains a mystery. The last hand I read was for a retired police officer from Sacramento. His card was the 9 of Wands. This suit means a desperate need for rest, a retreat to tend old wounds. Your mission is over and failure is imminent. I found out later this 72-year-old man was Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, responsible for 45 rapes, 115 burglaries, and 12 murders. He was apprehended just this week. It was my honor to predict his fall from anonymity, his arrogance his Achilles heel. No longer will he spend his days stalking his prey and calling their telephones. Who would that be? Hello? Sore loser. That makes 4 murderers, each with different cards I used to predict their fate. Their victims can all be summed by one, however. The 9 of Swords. Whether upright or inverted, this card means nothing but sorrow, nightmares, anxiety, hopelessness, and despair. On that note, shall we begin your reading? Let's see. Your first card is the Moon. Something in your life is not quite as it seems. Could it be a YouTube channel you've been watching? The second is Strength. But as I said, when a card is inverted, it means quite the opposite. Are you feeling a touch of self-doubt? The third? The High Priestess. Inverted. Warning of hidden agendas. You know, there was once a nursery rhyme written about my psychic parlor. Let's see, how did it go? Yes. Will you walk into my parlor? Said the spider to the fly. 'Tis the prettiest little parlor that you ever did spy. The way into my parlor is up a winding stair, and I have many a curious things to show you when you're there. It ends simply. And now, dear little children, who may this story read, to idle, silly, flattering words I pray you never give heed. Unto an evil counselor close heart and ear and eye, and take a lesson from this tale of the spider and his flies. I did say 4 murderers after all. I hope you enjoyed tonight's little program. For it seems you'll be our next show subject of interest. Only time can tell for certain. But if I were you, I would err on the side of caution. And as always, remember me as you scroll by. If you liked our show, then please subscribe. As we are now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me.
Do you hear that? I think another of my children of rot have come to find out what tomorrow holds. If you'd like to hear more tales of murderers, some of whom's fates I predicted, go over to Killers, Cults, Kingpins, and Crimes Facebook page. They have such lovely bedtime stories for you.